The poor cleaner is humiliated for eating leftovers from the mansion's dinner, but the millionaire's daughter follows her to the kitchen, and what she discovers shocks everyone. Leave a comment giving my story a score from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of plates being stacked echoed through the mansion's kitchen as the humble cleaner finished organizing the last utensils from the party that had taken place that night. Her calloused hands moved with precision among the fine china, each piece worth more than her monthly salary. For 3 years, she had worked in that imposing house, knowing every room, every detail of the routine of the 30-year-old widowed millionaire who employed her. The man had a striking appearance, as if he had stepped straight out of a movie and had inherited a business empire that provided him with an enviable fortune. His investments in stock market shares grew constantly, and his investments in different sectors guaranteed a cash flow that seemed inexhaustible. Even keeping part of his fortune in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, money was never a concern in his life. The cleaner knew that this world of wealth was distant from her reality. She shared a small house in the outskirts of town with her older sister, a frail woman who depended on constant care and expensive medication. Every penny of her salary was directed towards medical treatments, leaving little for other basic needs. That night, after the departure of the last guests from the business party, she remained in the kitchen tidying up the remains of the banquet. The aroma of the exquisite dishes that were left over aroused a hunger that she had been trying to ignore for hours. She looked around, making sure she was alone, and discreetly began to eat some of the leftovers that would be discarded. It wasn't for herself that she did that. The image of her sister at home, weak and without the strength to eat properly, motivated her to save some pieces of food that could make a difference the next day. Each bite was accompanied by a feeling of shame, but also of desperate need. It was then that she heard voices approaching. The millionaire returned to the kitchen, accompanied by some important partners, discussing details of a new investment. She tried to hide, but it was too late. "What's going on here?" Her boss's voice cut through the air like a blade. The guests stopped talking, and all eyes turned to her, who was still holding a piece of food in her hands. The silence in the kitchen became deafening. She felt heat rising up her face, humiliation taking over her entire being. I was just—" she began to stammer, but could not complete the sentence. One of the partners whispered something in the other's ear, and she could catch words like desperate and undignified. The millionaire watched the scene with an expression of embarrassment and contained anger. His reputation before those important men was being stained by that situation. "You're fired," he said, his voice cold and cutting. "Take your things and leave immediately." The cleaner felt the world collapse around her. 3 years of honest work, 3 years building a routine that allowed her to take care of her sister, all crumbling in a matter of minutes. She lowered her head, mumbled an almost inaudible apology, and left the kitchen under the judging eyes of those present. As she gathered her few belongings, silent tears streamed down her face. How would she explain to her sister that she had lost her job? How would they pay for next month's medication? The questions hammered in her mind without finding answers. But she didn't know that small, curious eyes had witnessed the whole scene. The millionaire's daughter, an observant 4-year-old girl, had come down the stairs to get water and watched everything from afar, hidden behind the door. The child, sensitive and intelligent beyond her age, realized that something terrible had happened to the only employee in the house who really cared about her. The girl had created a special bond with the cleaner over those 3 years. Unlike the other maids her father hired, she always had time to talk, to listen to her childish stories, and to take care of her with genuine affection. Seeing that woman being humiliated in that way awakened in the child a feeling of injustice that she could not fully understand. Determined to find out where the cleaner had gone, the girl waited for her father to be distracted by business, and, taking advantage of a moment of carelessness, secretly left the mansion. Her little feet ran along the sidewalk, following the distant figure of the woman who walked dejectedly towards the bus stop. The child kept a safe distance, hiding behind trees and parked cars, determined to find out where the person she cared about most in that big, cold house lived. What she was about to discover would change not only her perception of life, but also the fate of everyone involved in that story of prejudice, need, and redemption. The girl followed the cleaner for almost an hour, always keeping a safe distance. Her little legs began to hurt, but the determination to discover the truth was greater than any physical discomfort. The bus stopped in a simple neighborhood, distant from the opulence to which she was accustomed. The houses were small and modest, some with peeling paint and unkempt gardens. When the cleaner finally stopped in front of a one-story house with a rusty iron gate, the girl hid behind a lamppost. She watched carefully as the woman opened the door and entered, letting a sliver of light escape through the opening. It was then that she made the most courageous decision of her young life: approach the side window to see what was happening inside that house. What she witnessed through the half-open curtain left her completely shocked. The cleaner was kneeling beside a bed where a visibly debilitated woman lay, with a frail appearance and pale skin. It was her older sister, who could barely lift her head to receive her younger sister's affection. "I brought you food," whispered the cleaner, carefully removing from her bag the pieces of food she had managed to save from the party. "I know you couldn't eat properly today." The sick sister smiled weakly, trying to disguise the pain she felt. "You didn't need to risk yourself for my sake. What if they caught you?" Tears welled up again in the cleaner's eyes. "They caught me. I lost my job today." The silence that followed was devastating. The woman in the bed tried to sit up, alarmed by the news, but did not have enough strength. "How are we going to pay for the medication? The specialist appointment is next week." "We'll figure something out," lied the cleaner, trying to sound confident. "We always figure something out." The girl watched everything with wide eyes, finally understanding the real reason why the cleaner had taken that food. It wasn't greed or lack of character, as the adults in the mansion had judged. It was pure love and desperation from a sister who would do anything to take care of someone she loved. In the days that followed, the girl couldn't get that scene out of her head. Back at the mansion, she watched her father hire different maids, all of them efficient but cold, without the genuine affection that the former cleaner showed. None of them really cared about her, treating her only as another professional obligation. The millionaire noticed the change in his daughter's behavior. She had become quieter, more introspective, spending long periods looking out the window as if searching for something she could not find. All his attempts to talk were answered with monosyllables or total silence. A week after the dismissal, the girl made a decision. Taking advantage of the fact that her father was in an important meeting and the new employee was busy with other tasks, she left the mansion again. This time, she carried a small backpack full of things she considered important. Some toys she no longer used, cookies she had saved from her snack, and even some coins she had found scattered around the house. The way to the cleaner's house was already engraved in her childish memory. She knocked timidly on the door, her heart racing with nervousness. When the door opened, the cleaner was completely surprised to see the little girl standing there. "What are you doing here? Does your father know where you are?" she asked, looking nervously around. "I brought some things for you and your sister," said the girl, holding out the backpack. "I know she's sick." The cleaner knelt down to be at the child's height, touched by the innocence and generosity of the gesture. "You shouldn't have come here. It's dangerous to walk alone in these places." "I don't care about the danger. You're my friends." At that moment, the sick sister called weakly from the bed, asking who was at the door. When the girl entered the small room and saw the woman's condition up close, her tears began to roll. Without hesitation, she approached the bed and took the sick woman's frail hand. "I'll take care of you too," she said with the unique sincerity of children. "Daddy has a lot of money. He can buy the medicine you need." The cleaner and her sister exchanged glances full of emotion and disbelief. That child, raised in wealth and privilege, showed a compassion that many adults would never know. She had seen beyond appearances and social differences, seeing only two people who needed help. From that day on, a secret routine was established. The girl visited the house whenever she managed to escape the mansion's surveillance, bringing small gifts, food, and above all, company. She played with simple toys, listened to stories from the sick sister about better times, and helped the cleaner with household chores. The two sisters took turns taking care of the child during these visits, creating an environment of care and protection that she did not find in her own home. The girl discovered the value of simple things: a sincere conversation, a warm hug, the genuine attention of someone who cared about her feelings. For 6 months, this secret was carefully kept. The girl became an expert at inventing excuses for her absences and hiding the signs of her adventures. She learned about a reality completely different from her own, about struggle, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Meanwhile, at the mansion, her father faced difficulties in keeping employees for very long. None of them managed to establish the same connection with his daughter, who remained distant and melancholic. He did not understand the reason for this change, attributing it to some natural phase of child development. But secrets, no matter how well kept, eventually find a way to come to light. And when that moment arrived, the whole dynamic between these people would be altered irreversibly. The millionaire had noticed subtle changes in his daughter's behavior that left him increasingly intrigued. Her clothes came back slightly dirty, she talked about people he didn't know, and stranger still, she showed knowledge about diseases and medical treatments that a child her age shouldn't know. The last straw was when he found toys in her room that had definitely not been bought by him. Determined to find out what was happening, he discreetly hired a private investigator. He didn't suspect anything serious. He just wanted to understand why his daughter had become so reserved and distant. What he discovered through the detailed report initially left him furious. The photographs showed his daughter entering and leaving a modest house in the outskirts of town, always carrying a backpack. The investigator had identified that the house belonged to his former employee, the same one he had fired months ago for stealing food. The initial anger was intense. How dare that woman manipulate his daughter to get money? One Thursday afternoon, he decided to personally follow the girl's steps. He kept his distance as she walked purposefully through the streets until she reached the rusty gate he already knew from the photographs. When he saw his daughter being greeted with smiles and warm hugs by the cleaner, his indignation grew even more. He waited a few minutes before knocking violently on the door. The cleaner opened it and paled instantly when she saw him standing there, with an expression of contained fury that she knew well. "What do you think you're doing with my daughter?" His voice came out louder than he intended. The girl appeared running behind the cleaner, surprised but not frightened to see her father. "Daddy, you came to meet my friends. Get in the car immediately," he ordered, without taking his eyes off the cleaner. "We're going to talk at home." "But Daddy, Auntie is very sick and needs—" "Now!" His voice cut off any attempt at explanation. The cleaner knelt down to the girl's height, whispering words of comfort. "Go with your father, sweetie. It's okay." The millionaire watched that interaction with redoubled attention. There was something in the way the cleaner treated his daughter, a genuine affection that contrasted with his initial suspicions. But his anger was still stronger than any other consideration. On the way back home, the girl tried to explain, but he maintained a tense silence. Only when they arrived at the mansion did he allow himself to explode. "How could you do this to me? Sneak out, lie, visit strange people." "They're not strange, they're my friends," the girl replied with a determination that surprised him. "That woman is taking advantage of you. She wants our money." "No, she doesn't. She takes care of her sick sister with her own money. She doesn't even accept it when I bring things to them." For the first time, the millionaire stopped to really listen to what his daughter was saying. The child's words contained details that did not match his theories about manipulation and financial interest. That night, he couldn't sleep. The images of what he had witnessed mingled with his daughter's innocent explanations. He decided that he needed to see the reality of that house with his own eyes before making any final decision. The next day, he returned to the neighborhood, but this time with different intentions. He watched the house from afar, saw the cleaner leaving early to look for work and returning in the late afternoon with a tired and frustrated expression. He also saw neighbors bringing food and offering help, confirming that the situation of need was real. When he finally decided to knock on the door again, his posture was completely different. The cleaner greeted him nervously, expecting another outburst of anger. "Can I come in?" His voice was calmer, almost hesitant. She led him to the small living room, where he could see up close the precarious state of the house. There were no luxuries, only the essentials, and even then many things needed repairs. It was then that he heard a weak voice coming from the bedroom. "Who's here?" "Is it the little girl?" The cleaner quickly explained that it was the child's father, and the voice asked him to come closer. Reluctantly, the millionaire entered the small room and was faced with a clearly debilitated woman, but who made a visible effort to sit up in bed. "Thank you for allowing your daughter to visit us," she said sincerely. "She brought so much joy to our difficult days. She shouldn't be here. It's dangerous for a child." "You're right. We tried to convince her not to come anymore, but she's very stubborn." The sick woman smiled weakly. "Just like you, from what my sister tells me." The millionaire was disconcerted by the comment. "Does my former employee talk about me?" "She always said that you were a good boss, fair and correct. She was very sad when she lost her job, not because of the dismissal itself, but because of disappointing someone she respected." These words hit him like a punch in the gut. He had expected to find resentment, perhaps even revenge plans, but not a defense of his character made by someone he had publicly humiliated. The cleaner returned with a simple tea and sat in a plastic chair next to the bed. "Your daughter is a special child. She sees beyond appearances. Why did you take the food that night?" The question came out more directly than he intended. "My sister hadn't been able to eat for 2 days. The medicines make her nauseous, but she needed to eat something so she wouldn't get worse." She spoke without self-pity, just explaining the facts. "I know I was wrong, but why didn't you ask for help? An advance on your salary?" The cleaner lowered her eyes. "I had already asked for 3 advances that month. I didn't want to abuse your generosity." The silence that followed was filled with painful understanding. The millionaire was beginning to realize the extent of his error in judgment, but also the complexity of the situation that had unfolded. It was then that the sick sister had an attack of violent coughing up blood that stained the handkerchief she had taken to her mouth. The despair on the cleaner's face was palpable, and she ran to get the medication. "She needs urgent surgery," she explained, her voice choked. "But it costs more than I could save in years." At that moment, observing the desperate love of one sister for the other, the millionaire found himself facing a decision that would change the course of all those lives. The millionaire didn't hesitate. At that moment, seeing the genuine despair stamped on the cleaner's face and the suffering of the sick sister, all the social barriers and prejudices he carried collapsed. Without thinking twice, he picked up the phone and called the best private hospital in the city, demanding that an ambulance be sent immediately. "What are you doing?" asked the cleaner, incredulous. "Saving a life," he replied, already dialing another number, "and correcting a terrible mistake I made." During the following hours at the hospital, while the sick sister underwent urgent tests, the millionaire organized all the financial details needed to pay for the complete treatment. His investments in stocks and the capital accumulated over the years finally found a purpose that went beyond the mere accumulation of wealth. The cleaner remained silent, still processing the turnaround of that situation. The man who had fired her coldly was now moving mountains to save her sister. When she finally managed to speak, her words came out loaded with emotion. "Why are you doing this for us?" He looked at his daughter, who had insisted on accompanying them to the hospital, and was now sleeping in the cleaner's lap, as if that were the most natural place in the world. "Because my daughter taught me that there is something more important than money or social position. She showed me what I had lost sight of." In the days that followed, while the sister recovered from the successful surgery, a strange dynamic was established between them. The millionaire offered the job back to the cleaner, but now there was a different tension in the air. It was no longer just an employer-employee relationship. There was gratitude, vulnerability, and something else that neither dared to name. The cleaner returned to work at the mansion, but now the boss often found her in the kitchen, talking to his daughter about simple things in life. He began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way she carefully took care of each object in the house, as if it were her own family, the infinite patience she showed with his daughter, the inner strength that kept her standing even in the face of the greatest adversities. In turn, she began to see beyond the cold facade of the businessman. She observed how he worked tirelessly to maintain his businesses, not just for profit, but to honor the memory of his late wife. She noticed the deep loneliness he carried, the way he looked at his daughter with a mixture of love and despair, as if he feared not being enough for her. During the weeks of the sister's recovery, casual encounters became longer conversations. He asked about the treatment, offered additional help, and she responded with a gratitude that went far beyond words. Slowly, the barriers that separated them began to dissolve. One night, when the daughter was already asleep and the house was silent, he found her in the kitchen preparing tea to take home. "How is she feeling today?" he asked, referring to her sister. "Much better. The doctors say the recovery is being exceptional." She paused, then continued in a lower voice. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did for us. You don't need to thank me. I should apologize for what happened that night." They were silent for a few moments, the air charged with an energy that neither could ignore. It was then that he made a decision that had been maturing for weeks. "I need to show you something," he said, leading her to his private office. There, he removed from a safe some documents and photographs that she had never seen. They were papers related to a philanthropic project that his late wife had secretly started in the last months of her life. "My wife was a volunteer doctor in several clinics in the outskirts of town. I discovered these documents weeks after her passing." His voice was filled with emotion. She had created a fund to pay for treatments for needy patients. The cleaner watched the photographs with growing surprise. She recognized the clinic where her sister was treated, and then saw something that left her breathless, a photo of her own sister being examined by a young, smiling doctor. "Is this your wife?" she asked, touching the photograph with trembling fingers. "Yes. And look at this." He showed a list of names of patients who would benefit from the fund. Her sister's name was there, highlighted with a special mark. "She knew your sister's case. She had personally chosen which treatments would be paid for. The fund was being organized to start operating in the month following the accident that took her." Tears streamed freely down the cleaner's face. The discovery that the millionaire's wife had specifically cared about her sister, that she had planned to help them without them knowing, completely transformed her understanding of that family. "That's why I wanted to pay for the surgery," he continued. "It wasn't charity. It was continuing the work she had started. It was honoring her memory the way she would have liked." At that moment, all the pieces fell into place. The connection between them was not just circumstantial. There was something greater, a purpose that had united them through the compassion of a woman who, even absent, continued to spread love. In the months that followed, the relationship between them blossomed naturally. There were no more social barriers or prejudices. There were just two people who had found in each other something they didn't know they were looking for. The cleaner's sister recovered completely, returning to have the energy to live fully. The girl had gained not only a new family, but also learned valuable lessons about compassion and social justice. And the millionaire discovered that his true wealth was not in his financial investments or properties, but in the genuine love that had grown in his life. A year after that fateful night in the kitchen, they were married in a simple but meaningful ceremony. The recovered sister was the bridesmaid, the girl scattered petals along the way, and somehow everyone felt the presence of the late wife blessing that union. What had started with prejudice and humiliation turned into a story of redemption, forgiveness, and true love. They proved that social differences are just barriers created by ignorance, and that genuine love has the power to transform not only individual lives, but an entire perception of what really matters in the world.